video for a relatively cheap and easy curry. So I've got some leftover carrot soup which I made the other day. You don't have to make your own carrot soup, you can just buy it. There's 600 millilitres in there, so I'm going to use 400 grams of tin tomatoes. We'll put those in there because they haven't been chopped, so we just need to puree them up. I've got 600 grams of chicken. That's too much. I'm going to make too much sauce for 600 grams of chicken, so the sauce that I'm going to make, the kind of quantity we'll make, would be enough for 1.2 kilograms of chicken. So I'm going to make the curry sauce and I'm going to freeze half of it. Because the carrot soup has already got milk in it, I can't preserve it, but I can freeze it. If you want to preserve things in jars and you put milk and there's milk in whatever you're trying to preserve, it wants to ferment and it goes off. I don't know why. Someone probably I'll find out at some stage. But that's what happens. So we'll puree the tomatoes whole, so we'll puree that down. We've got coconut. It's coconut flour. And I've got 40 grams of that. I've got a tiny little bit of chili, and I've got I've got 35 grams of mild curry powder. I always buy mild curry powder, so then I can always add a little bit of chili to it. If you buy hot curry powder, then you're kind of limited that you're just going to have to make hot curries or not make them as spicy or as hot. So I always like to buy mild curry powder, and then if I want it slightly hotter, I can always add a little bit of chili. Don't need to though, that's fine. And I've got 400 grams of onions, which I've peeled and chopped kind of quite roughly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sweat those down just a little bit in a pan with a little bit of water, a little bit of salt, so it draws some of the moisture out, so they'll steam in the pan. And then we'll add the rest of the ingredients, bring it up to the temperature, and then I'm going to add the chicken. Don't need to fry the chicken off, don't need to fry the onions off. Sometimes I do, if I'm really kind of struggling for where the flavour is kind of coming from with a dish. If there's not much, if I'm limited on spices and flavours and that type of thing, I will always fry off meat and onions as a way of getting more flavour into things. But there's going to be plenty of flavour in the soup and the tomatoes and the curry powder and the chilli already, so I'm not going to bother frying off the chicken and the onions. So what we're going to do, so dead easy. We'll just puree that down. It would cook, the tomatoes would cook down, and you can smash them up a little bit with a spoon as they're cooking in the pan. But there's also going to be onions in there, so I don't want the onions to kind of break down. I want the onions to kind of be quite whole. So we're going to puree the tomato. Into the soup. I'll rinse the tin out as well. I'm not going to waste that. So that's it. So we'll come back once the onions are cooked and we add everything to the pan. So it kind of gives a bit of a recap on what you kind of do and how you do it. So the onions have softened, so we can add the carrot and the tomato mix. Scoop that out in a second. And then the curry powder, the coconut powder, flour, and the chili. So we'll give that a stir. We'll bring that up to the boil. Well, up to temperature, and then we'll add the chicken into it without frying it off, which will be fine. It'll go thicker because we're adding a powder to it and a flour, so that'll be fine. You can use desiccated coconut, but it's best off just to put it through a spice grinder, just to kind of break it up a little bit. Otherwise, you end up with those nasty bits all kind of stuck in your teeth. You can use proper tinned coconut, that'd be fine as well. It's just that I use the coconut flour in baking as well, so it's something I've always got in the fridge. And sometimes you don't want a whole tin of coconut, and it just seems you end up with half tins of things, and it just seems a bit of a waste. And it's kind of quite expensive to buy this coconut in a tin, so, or the cream coconut. So it's best off just to have the flour. So get some temperature under that. Now it's mixed, and then we'll get up to temperature. Cut half. We'll split it in half, and then I'll put the chicken in. I won't put that there. I'll scrub that out in a second. So I'm going to use the cheap rice, and I'm going to just slightly change the method that I use. I normally use 2 parts water to 1 part rice. it goes sticky, does this. Last time I had the rice, it was nice because I agitated the rice just a little bit, just as it was starting to finish cooking, and it went sticky. I normally quite like sticky rice, but today what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the content of water that we cook the rice in, so to see how it turns out. So we see if we can get it nice, light and fluffy, without it going too glutinous, because it's got a habit of going kind of quite glutinous, does this rice. So we'll see how it goes. So we'll see if we can do it quite easily without having to faff around too much. So I reckon we're like 4 parts water, 1 pint rice, and then it'll boil in the water. It's kind of quite not the way you're supposed to cook rice, by all means, but we'll do it that way, see how it turns out. More of an experiment more than anything else. Also, because I'm using carrot soup in this that I've already seasoned with stock cube, so that was kind of like perfectly seasoned, you just need to be careful about how much you add salt wise to things. So I know that I've already seasoned it, so it won't need as much salt when I come around to adding a bit of salt after I've added the chicken. Just something you need to be a little bit wary of. Certainly, and if you don't have to use, I used homemade carrot soup. You don't have to use homemade carrot soup. You can buy tins of carrot soup, and same applies. That it's already seasoned is that carrot soup. You just need to be careful about how much salt that you add into things. Always add a little, taste it, and then add a little bit more. As always, it's easier to add a little bit more than try and take it away. It has come up to the boil. And it's been simmering for 5 minutes. I did that because I wanted to make sure that everything that I put in there was completely sterile before I put it in containers and then in the freezer. Ordinarily, what I would have done was at the same time that I put everything in, that's when I would have added the meat. It's quite a versatile curry. I've had it with chickpeas, and I've had it with cooked meat as well as raw meat, so it's really nice. I'll do sometime in the future, I'll do it with chickpeas and kind of show you. But it's a nice curry. I've never had someone say that it wasn't very nice. So, where are we? I think we'll get double out of this. So take that there. Just 1 container, so that's all right. So half that recipe that we said is enough for 600 grams of raw meat. So that there, and then the chicken straight in. The chicken's frozen, so it's straight out of the freezer. I had a bit of a clear out in the freezer, so it's out of the freezer. So 600 grams, so we reckon that's a good 4 portions. Get rid of that, wash hands. So it's a good 4 portions. Give it a stir, and then we'll get it back up to temperature, and then slowly cook for an hour. And then that'll be enough. Sometimes what I do as well is actually marinate the meat in a little bit of the curry powder for 24 hours. But it was one of those things that I didn't have time to marinate the meat, so it doesn't matter. It'll be fine. I won't add any more curry powder to compensate for that. It will be nice enough as it is. So back up to boiling, and then really slow simmer for an hour, and then that will be ready. So the curry has come up to temperature, so we'll just give it a quick taste. I've got some salt somewhere. It'll need a little bit of salt, but not too much, because the carrot soup was already seasoned. So we'll give it a taste. Just needs a little bit of salt, because what's going to happen is the chicken is going to absorb some of the salt from that's already in the sauce. So we kind of need to slightly over season, if that kind of makes sense. The onions and the sauce will be perfectly seasoned now if you taste it, but there's no seasoning in the chicken. The chicken's going to cook for an hour, so it's going to absorb some of that salt. So some of the seasoning. So you just kind of need to compensate for that. So that now is going to go on the smallest gas burner that I've got on the lowest flame. It's going to cook gently for an hour, hour and a half, something like that, just so it's really nice and tender. But there's no rush. You know, you don't want to boil meat because it goes stringy. I'm using thigh meat and leg meat really, because it's the drumstick and the thigh. It takes longer, but there's more flavour to it. If you're using breast, basically as soon as the breast is cooked all the way through, it's tender. Thigh meat and drumstick meat isn't particularly like that. You just need to cook it for a little bit longer, and it'll certainly benefit from cooking for that little bit longer as well. Breast meat doesn't benefit from being cooked longer. As soon as breast meat's cooked, it's not going to get any tenderer. It's actually going to deteriorate in its texture. So, hour and a half on a really slow bubble, and it'll be absolutely. Curry and rice are ready. What I did with the rice, like I said I did 1 part rice to 4 parts water. You've got to drain it through a sieve to get rid of the excess water, but it worked. It certainly gets rid of the gloop with it, let's call it. So it's kind of quite fluffy, which is kind of quite nice. So we'll have some of that. As long as you don't move it around too much, it'll stay nice and kind of quiet and light and fluffy. You probably could have done with a little bit more water. If I'm entirely honest, it still looks like it could form into a big thick ball, but it doesn't really matter. Right, so I was thinking while the curry was cooking, and I once made the curry using raw salmon. So I had a lot of salmon that I wasn't going to do anything else with. It was in the freezer. It was getting a little bit past the best, and I did use this curry sauce to make a salmon curry, and it was lovely. Normally I would put in some coriander, but I'm not going to buy any. It's just that wrong time of year, and it does not. I haven't got any growing, so I'm not going to bother with that. However, I have in the past made it with parsley, and that was very nice as well. So certainly 4 really good portions. I reckon 150 grams of rice, and then a quarter of this as a portion will be absolutely lovely. I haven't worked out the cost of it yet. I've just been a bit preoccupied with other things. It's snowed again today, so there's been other things to do. So there we go. It's nice, if I'm honest. It's a really good curry. I don't know if it's how authentic. I don't think it's authentic at all, using like a carrot puree and tomatoes, but it certainly tastes nice, and I've never had any complaints. Very versatile, so it does like fish, chicken, raw meats, beef and lamb, goat I would have thought as well, and it also does. So if I've also had some cooked meats as well, so if I've got like some leftover lamb or some beef, it certainly works with cooked meats as well. So yeah, so I'd even say with whitefish as well. So if you had some cod or something like that, and mix like those bags of mixed seafood, that would all work as well. Anyway, so that's it. I don't know what it costs. I'll put it in the description and the recipe, and there you go.